Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. The judge's gavel struck the wood. A heavy, dry, authoritarian echo. In the Brookfield courtroom, no one dared to breathe. The wooden benches barely creaked under the weight of the curious, the journalists, and the families who came to attend the most talked-about hearing of the year, the Turner vs. Virginia case. In the center, a handcuffed man, dressed in an orange uniform, his head bowed. His face bore the marks of fatigue and humiliation. On the bench, Judge Eleanor Harper, 47, calmly placed her glasses on the desk. Her usually impassive face seemed slightly tense. In her 20 years of practice, she had seen the worst criminals, heard the most skillful lies, and delivered verdicts that made entire families tremble. But today, something was different. When the bailiff announced, "The Brookfield County hearing is open. The case of Michael Turner v. the state." Eleanor looked up, and her world stopped. In front of her, the accused raised his head. And in that tired look, she recognized the boy she had loved like a brother. He was not a criminal. It was Michael Turner, his childhood friend. A flood of images crossed his mind. 2 children running barefoot through the streets of Riverside, sharing a sandwich on a rusty bench. Summer nights spent dreaming of the future. Their childhood promise, whatever happens, we will always protect ourselves. Eleanor felt her throat tighten. Her heart was beating faster than the sound of the cameras. How could this man, once so good, so just, find himself here, accused of murder? "Mr. Turner, stand up," she said, trying to make her voice firm. Michael obeyed. Slowly. He looked up at her. And when they crossed paths, the silence in the room became almost supernatural. A faint, sad smile appeared on her lips. "Hello, Ellie," he barely murmured. That name, no one had called her that for over 20 years. Eleanor felt an icy heat run through her. Her hands trembled beneath her black dress. Memories came flooding back, teenage evenings, complicity, then separation. She left to study law, he stayed in the country to work in his father's garage. But the file in front of her wasn't about memories. He was talking about blood. Of treason. Of murder. Michael Turner, 44, accused of killing Robert Mills, a wealthy property developer, during an altercation in a bar. Witnesses reportedly saw him hit the victim. The police claimed to have found his fingerprints on the bottle used as a weapon. And the press was already talking about the fall of the local hero turned murderer. Eleanor closed the file, her heart heavy. Everything about this affair seemed too simple, too neatly arranged. And deep inside her, a strange certainty was growing. Michael couldn't have done that. But she wasn't a friend today. She was the judge. And the code was clear: justice knows neither face, nor past, nor memory. Yet, as she watched Michael return to his seat, she knew that this trial would change her life. Not just because she knew the accused, but because what she was about to discover in the coming days would expose the darkest secrets of her own court. On that day, in the Brookfield courtroom, justice lost its mask of impartiality. And a judge, confronted with her past, had to choose between the law and the truth. On the evening of the first day of the hearing, Judge Eleanor Harper was unable to sleep. The rain hammered against the windows of her Brookfield apartment, and each drop seemed to resonate like an echo of the past. She kept seeing that look, Michael Turner's, and the silent pain it contained. She couldn't help but murmur. "What did you do, Michael? What did they do to you?" On his bedside table, the case file was open, but his eyes wandered through the pages without reading them. His thoughts, however, had gone back 27 years. At the time, Riverside, a small town in Virginia, was just a peaceful place bordered by the river. The inhabitants all knew each other, children ran in the alleyways, and on summer evenings, you could hear the song of crickets in the distance. This was where Eleanor Williams, she wasn't Harper yet, had grown up. And that's where she met Michael Turner. Michael was the local boy, lively, funny, always ready to help. He repaired the bikes of the neighborhood kids, made the old folks laugh, and hid a disarming kindness beneath his swaggering exterior. Eleanor, however, was different, reserved, dreamy, always immersed in her books. Her mother, a teacher, often repeated, "My daughter will be a lawyer, you'll see. She has a sense of justice in her blood." It was one evening, after school, that they became friends. Eleanor had her bag stolen by two older boys. Michael, witnessing the scene, didn't hesitate to run after them to get it back. He returned breathless, his knees scraped, bag in hand. "Look, it's a bit dirty, but at least they didn't keep it." "Thank you, you didn't have to." "Yes, I was." "You don't abandon someone from the neighborhood." From that day on, they were inseparable. Years passed. Their friendship evolved into a deeper affection, without ever crossing the line into love. Michael often came to study at Eleanor's house, under the warm light of the kitchen. "Tell me, Ellie, what's the point of all this? The books, the laws, the judges?" "To make the world a more just place," she replied passionately. "Do you think the world wants to be fair?" "No. That's why we need people like me, and like you." Michael smiled. He didn't share her ambitions, but he liked the way she believed in good. She, the intellectual. He's the instinctive one. Two opposing souls, yet connected by an indestructible loyalty. When Eleanor was accepted to Columbia Law School, she was afraid to tell him the news. "New York? That's far away," Michael murmured. "I know. But that's what I've always wanted." "Yeah. And you deserve it. You're going to be someone, Ellie." "You too, Michael. You'll see. You have a gift. My only gift is understanding you." They had hugged one last time under the old Riverside Bridge. That night, Eleanor had vowed to return. But she never really came back. The years flew by. Eleanor became a lawyer, then a judge. She married a lawyer, Daniel Harper, whose name she took. A brief, passionless marriage, ending in the silence of the courts. She took refuge in her work, convinced that justice was her only family. For his part, Michael stayed in Riverside. He took over his father's garage, then founded his own company, Turner Auto Repair. For a while, everything was fine. But the city changed. Investors began buying up small businesses. Among them was a certain Robert Mills, an unscrupulous developer obsessed with rebuilding the city center. Mills wanted to raze an entire historic district to build a housing complex. Michael strongly opposed it, leading the merchants in a courageous resistance. "This neighborhood is our memories," he said. "Not a commodity." But Mills was powerful. And in a city where everyone knew everything, it didn't take long for tensions to rise. One evening, after a heated meeting, Mills was found dead behind the bar of the Golden Tavern. A broken bottle beside him, and the name Michael on everyone's lips. The arrest was brutal. The police officers arrived at his workshop one rainy morning. Michael didn't even have time to understand. "Michael Turner, you are under arrest for voluntary manslaughter." "What? No, wait, it's a mistake. I didn't do anything." But nobody wanted to listen to him. The main witness, Ethan Bradley, stated that he saw Michael hit Mills. The evidence seemed solid: fingerprints, confirmed argument, obvious motive. In just a few days, everything changed. The neighborhood hero became the developer's murderer. And while Michael was being taken to Brookfield Detention Center, Eleanor, in her judge's office, received a file with a name that made her hand tremble. Michael Turner. She remained frozen for several long seconds, unable to breathe. The whole world seemed to have stopped. The boy from the past. The faithful friend. The protector. Now accused of murder. And she, Eleanor Harper, was going to have to judge him. Lightning ripped through the night, bringing Eleanor back to the present. She looked at her reflection in the window, a tired but determined face. She already knew that she was going to disobey what the law expected of her. Because behind every article, every code, every verdict, there is a human truth that justice sometimes forgets to see. And Eleanor Harper, for the first time in 20 years, was ready to risk everything to find her. Night had fallen on Brookfield, stifling and humid. Judge Eleanor Harper couldn't sleep. In the silence of her spacious home, everything seemed to weigh on her, the ticking of the clock, the whisper of the wind, and above all, the memories. On his kitchen table, Michael Turner's file remained open. Each page hurt him, the photos of the bloodied bar, the contradictory testimonies, the hastily written police report. Everything seemed to point to Michael, but something was amiss. Too many unanswered questions. Too many coincidences. Eleanor grabbed her phone and checked the time, 2:47 a.m. She hesitated, then dialed a number she knew by heart, that of Assistant District Attorney David Collins, an ambitious man, more interested in his career than in the truth. "Eleanor," replied a sleepy voice, "that it's almost 3 o'clock, what's going on?" "I need to review the Turner report. The video recordings, the physical evidence. Everything." "Eleanor, you know very well that this is against protocol. The case is in the hands of the prosecutor's office, not the judge. So make an exception." She replied coldly. "There's something strange about this case." "Strange? Like what?" "Like, too perfect. Too clean." Silence is heavy. David sighed, visibly annoyed. "Listen, Eleanor, it's just another case. A drunk guy, a fight, a dead man. We have the fingerprints, the witnesses. End of story." "No. Not for me." She replied, staring at Michael's photo. "Not for him." Before he could reply, she hung up. The next morning, the court was already buzzing. Cameras were lined up outside the entrance, and every journalist hoped for a reaction from Judge Harper, nicknamed by the press, the Iron Lady of Brookfield. But behind her glasses and black dress, Eleanor was hiding an inner storm. In the courtroom, Michael Turner was escorted to the stand. He briefly looked up at her, but said nothing. Her hands were trembling. Not from fear, but from helplessness. And when she asked him if he wished to testify, he simply nodded. "Madam Judge," Michael began in a grave voice, "I know what the newspapers are saying. I know what the police are saying. But I didn't kill that man." "You were seen at the scene," replied Prosecutor Collins. "And your fingerprints." "Yes, because I tried to help him," he suddenly exclaimed. "He was still alive when I arrived. He was bleeding, and I grabbed the bottle without thinking. I wanted to call for help." A murmur rippled through the room. Collins straightened up, cold and sarcastic. "What a hero. And yet, you never called emergency services." "Because I was hit from behind," Michael cried, his voice breaking. "When I woke up, he was dead, and the police were already handcuffing me." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment. That emotion, that sincerity, she recognized it. Michael wasn't playing a role. He was telling the truth. She could sense it. "Calm yourself, Mr. Turner," she said firmly, but without harshness. "Continue." Michael took a deep breath. Robert Mills wasn't a saint. He had debts, enemies. And that evening, he had arranged to meet me. He wanted me to testify against one of his associates, a dangerous guy. I never had a chance to speak. Everything happened too fast. The prosecutor jumped in. "Objection, Madam Judge. These are accusations without proof." "Rejected," Eleanor replied calmly, "let him finish." A slight tremor in his voice betrayed his unease. For the first time in her 20-year career, she felt emotionally connected to an accused person. When the session was adjourned, Eleanor remained seated for a long time in the silence of the court. The benches were emptying. The clerk was turning off the lights. And she, motionless, stared at the spot where Michael had stood. Then a familiar voice whispered behind her. "You're playing a dangerous game, Eleanor." She turned around. Prosecutor Collins stood in the shadows of the door, a cold smile on his lips. This guy is finished. And if you continue to defend him, your career will be finished too. Eleanor stood up slowly, her gaze hard. This is not a game, David. This is justice. And as she left the room, she knew one thing. Someone wanted Michael Turner to pay for a crime he did not commit. And this time, she would go all the way, even if it cost her everything she had built. The rain was beating against the windows of the courthouse. Lightning flashed across the deserted corridors, casting Eleanor Harper's shadow on the cold walls. It was almost midnight, and yet the judge was still there, alone, in her office. In front of her, the files were piling up. But Michael Turner's was open, scattered, annotated in the margins of nervous handwriting. She was rereading for the 10th time the autopsy report, the bartender's testimony, the chronology of the night of the murder. And the more she read, the more her doubt grew. One detail had just struck her. The surveillance camera report from the Red Oak bar indicated a power outage from 11:42 p.m. to midnight sharp, precisely during the fatal fight. An isolated, unique failure. And yet, the bar belonged to a man named Alan Pierce, a promoter known to be the business partner of Robert Mills, the victim. Eleanor frowned. She took out her phone and dialed a number. Lieutenant Davis? This is Judge Harper. I need some confidential information. Regarding the Turner case, replied a cautious voice. Exactly. Can you verify if Alan Pierce had any contact with the authorities within 24 hours of the murder? I can, but I risk a lot if it gets out. Do it discreetly. It's a matter of justice. A long silence followed, before the policeman gave in. Okay, I'll call you back in an hour. Eleanor hung up. She leaned back against her chair and closed her eyes for a moment. Michael's words still echoed in his head. He wanted me to testify against one of his associates, a dangerous guy. What if this dangerous guy was actually Pierce? What if Robert Mills had wanted to betray his partner before being eliminated, and Michael was used as a scapegoat? His heart raced. Everything suddenly took on a terrifying meaning. An hour later, the phone vibrated. Judge Harper? That's Davis. I'm listening to you. You were right. Alan Pierce left town the day after the murder. He took a flight to Miami at 6 in the morning. No questioning, no police report, nothing. And get this. What? He has a brother in the county police. He was the one who signed the initial crime scene report. Eleanor felt the blood run cold in her veins. Everything became clear, the case had been manipulated from the start. Thank you, Lieutenant. You never received that call, understand? Received, Madam Judge. She hung up and remained frozen, her eyes lost in the void. A cold anger was rising within her, not just against the system, but against herself. For years, she had believed in the purity of justice. Today, she saw how corrupt she could be. The next day, at the courthouse, Eleanor crossed paths with Prosecutor David Collins in the hallway. He wore an arrogant smile, a cup of coffee in his hand. You look unwell, Eleanor. Sleepless nights don't suit you. And lies suit you very well, she replied curtly. Oh, he did, feigning innocence, what are you talking about? From a certain Alan Pierce. And from the fact that his brother falsified a police report. The prosecutor's smile froze. I see you're meddling in things that don't concern you again. Be careful, Eleanor. These people have power. She looked him straight in the eyes. Me too. Then she turned on her heel, leaving David pale in the hallway. For the first time in a long time, she was no longer acting as a judge, but as a woman determined to deliver true justice. That same evening, Eleanor went discreetly to Brookfield Prison. She had used her authority to obtain a private interview with Michael. When he entered the small room with gray walls, handcuffed, he gave a slight smile. You haven't changed, Ellie. Still as stubborn as ever. And you, still as stubborn as ever, she replied with a faint smile. A silence. Then, more seriously. Michael, I've reopened your file. I found some disturbing things. Tell me the truth. That night, Robert Mills wanted you to testify against someone, didn't he? Yes, against Pierce. He told me he was going to report him for money laundering. But he was afraid. And then what? Then he received a call. He turned pale, told me we had to leave. 10 minutes later, he was dead. Eleanor nodded slowly. I knew there was more to it. You were set up, Michael. And I intend to prove it. Michael stared at her, moved. You're risking your career, Ellie. You shouldn't do this for me. I'm not doing it for you, she replied softly. I'm doing it for the truth. In the dim light of the room, their eyes met. And in that heavy silence, a silent promise was reborn between them. That of never betraying oneself again. But neither of them knew yet that this quest for truth would lead them much further than a simple trial. Right to the very heart of a judicial conspiracy ready to do anything to silence them. The tension was palpable in the corridors of the Brookfield courthouse. For the past few days, everything seemed strange, persistent stares, whispers as she passed by, files mysteriously disappearing from her office. Eleanor Harper sensed it, someone was watching her. But she had decided to go all the way. That morning, she arrived earlier than usual. In the dim light of her office, she inserted a USB key into the court's main computer. It was a confidential copy that Lieutenant Davis had given him, the real crime scene report, the one that had never been recorded in the official archives. The lines scrolled rapidly across the screen. The main camera footage shows a man leaving the premises at 11:48 p.m. Approximate height, 1.85 meters. Black suit. Bag over the shoulder. Eleanor enlarged the attached image, and felt her heart freeze. The man in the photo was neither Michael Turner nor a stranger. It was David Collins, the prosecutor himself. She remained petrified, her hands icy cold. Everything made sense, the threats, the manipulation of the file, Pierce's escape. Collins was at the center of the trap. He had orchestrated Mills' murder with Pierce, then framed Michael to protect their business. But before she could copy the file, a voice echoed in the hallway. Eleanor? Is that you? She jumped. It was David Collins. She snatched the USB key, slipped it into her pocket and pretended to put away some papers. A few seconds later, he entered, looking falsely relaxed, a fixed smile on his lips. Still digging into the past, Judge Harper? The past, David, sometimes has a strange way of coming back to haunt us. Are you implying something? No. I'm simply observing that the truth always comes to light in the end. A tense silence fell. Collins stared at her, his jaw clenched. Be careful what you say. You could lose everything. Eleanor gave a slight smile. Not everything, David. Not my integrity. He took a threatening step closer. You think you can bring me down? You have no proof. At that moment, the door suddenly opened. Lieutenant Davis appeared, accompanied by 2 federal agents. On the contrary, he said firmly. We have everything we need. The police surrounded Collins, who turned pale. What the? That's a mistake, he shouted, you don't have the right. You are under arrest for falsifying evidence, obstruction of justice, and complicity in murder, Davis declared calmly. Eleanor remained still. She watched him struggle, scream, and then be handcuffed. A mixture of relief and sadness gripped his chest. Collins turned one last hateful look towards her. You think you've won, Eleanor? This system is rotten to the core. You've only scratched the surface. The police took him away. And in the silence that followed, Eleanor felt a tear roll down her cheek. He was right about one thing, the system was sick. But she had just introduced the first crack. A few days later, the Brookfield courtroom vibrated with a new tension. News of the prosecutor's arrest made headlines in all the newspapers. And today, it was Michael Turner's verdict. The room was packed. Michael, freed from his handcuffs, stood straight, dressed in a simple suit. Her eyes, full of emotion, met Eleanor's. She took a deep breath. "Mr. Turner, after reviewing the evidence and finding a major falsification of the file, the court declares you not guilty." A murmur rippled through the room. Michael closed his eyes, overwhelmed by emotion. When he reopened them, his tears were glistening. "Thank you, Ellie," he murmured softly. Eleanor gave him a discreet smile. "No, Michael. Thank you, for reminding me why I became a judge." Later, in the park where they played as children, they met again. The setting sun gilded the trees, and the wind carried a scent of memories. "So, what are you going to do now?" asked Eleanor. "To take back my life. Maybe leave Brookfield." "You're right. This place holds too many ghosts." They remained silent for a moment, gazing at the lake where, in the past, they used to throw stones to skip them. Then Michael turned to her. "You know, I never forgot our promise, Ellie. The promise to never give up." Eleanor smiled, her eyes moist. "Me neither. And I think we've got it today." As they parted, one certainty became clear to her. Justice was not an institution, but a human struggle, fragile, painful, but essential. And sometimes, this fight began where all seemed lost.